Alright, so listen up, because Kendrick Lamar just did something at the BET Awards that literally nobody in the entire history of hip-hop has ever managed to pull off, and the internet is losing its whole mind over it right now. 5 years back-to-back, 8 trophies deep, 0 competition even close enough to sniff the podium, and somehow, in the middle of one of the most historic runs this genre has ever seen, there is a whole army of grown adults on the internet foaming at the mouth trying to convince the timeline that Kendrick Lamar does not deserve the same trophy he just picked up with his own 2 hands. Y'all, this is about to be a mess, so buckle up because we are breaking down every single receipt, every single meltdown, and every single reason why the loudest voices in this argument have absolutely no ground to stand on. For anyone just catching up on this, here is exactly what went down. Kendrick Lamar just became the first rapper in the entire history of the BET Awards to win Best Male Hip-Hop Artist 5 years in a row, stretching all the way from 2022 straight through 2026. That trophy count for this one specific category is now sitting at 8 total wins, and honey, that is a number nobody else in this genre is anywhere close to matching. Not one rapper from any era, any coast, any label mate, any collective has ever stacked wins like this back to back to back to back. This is not a lucky streak. This is not a popularity contest that got out of hand. This is a documented, unmatched, printed-in-ink run that belongs in the culture's official history books, and it deserves every ounce of respect that comes with it. But of course, because this is the internet and this is 2026, the second Kendrick Lamar's name got announced, a very specific corner of hip-hop fandom decided that instead of celebrating a genuinely historic moment, they were going to cook up outrage out of thin air. Peep this. The main complaint bouncing all over the timeline goes something like, how can Kendrick Lamar win an award in 2026 when he didn't even drop a brand new album this whole year? And on the surface, sure, that sounds like a fair question if you don't actually understand how art, culture, and impact work in real life. But once you dig even one layer deeper, that whole argument crumbles instantly. And it crumbles because of one project that flat out refuses to leave the culture no matter how many months roll by. That project is GNX. And if you somehow forgot just how heavy this album still is, let this be your reminder. As of right now, GNX is still sitting as the highest-selling hip-hop album of 2025, moving well past 2 million equivalent units, a number most rappers active today will never touch in their entire careers, let alone off one project. This was not just a commercial win. GNX went on to win Rap Album of the Year, cemented itself into Super Bowl history through the same run, and kept generating cultural conversation for months after its release cycle was supposed to be over. Keep in mind though, when an album is still selling, still streaming, still being quoted line for line, still being dissected on podcasts, and still getting referenced a full year after it drops, that is not a project that faded. That is a body of work that reshaped the entire lane it landed in. So when the timeline starts asking why Kendrick Lamar deserved to win Best Male Hip-Hop Artist in a year where he didn't drop something brand new, the honest answer is real simple. GNX never left. It has been camping at the top this entire time, quietly outperforming albums that came out with way more promotion, way more press, and way less staying power. And that brings us straight to the actual criteria behind this trophy, which almost none of the people crying about it bothered to look up before they started firing off tweets into the void. Best Male Hip-Hop Artist is not, and has never been, framed as strictly an Album of the Year category. This recognition is built around overall cultural impact, influence, staying power, and relevance across the whole eligibility window, not simply whoever managed to drop something the fastest. Features count. Cultural conversation counts. Longevity counts. If the whole industry is still spinning around your last body of work while other rappers are trying and failing to knock it out of the cultural bloodstream, that absolutely counts. Kendrick Lamar did not need a fresh drop this year because the drop he already gave the world in the last cycle was still doing more damage than almost anything releasing brand new off the press. That is not a loophole. That is exactly what this category was designed to measure. Now here is where things get genuinely messy, because this win didn't just upset random anonymous accounts online. It upset fans of other rappers who dropped multiple projects this year and still walked home empty-handed. One particular rapper released 3 separate albums as a nominee this cycle and still couldn't take home the trophy. And understandably, that has left a whole slice of his fanbase absolutely losing it. But here is the uncomfortable truth nobody on that side wants to sit with. Those 3 albums came out, generated a news cycle for about a week, and then quietly disappeared from the conversation almost entirely. Compare that cultural footprint to something like Kendrick Lamar's Iceman-adjacent debate, the ongoing Super Bowl chatter, or the constant online noise that follows literally everything Kendrick Lamar does, and the gap in real cultural weight becomes impossible to ignore. Quantity of releases has never automatically translated into quality of impact, and this year proved that better than almost any other example we have seen recently. Let's talk about Iceman for a second too, because that comparison keeps coming up in these conversations whether people want to admit it or not. If you actually sit with that project, it plays less like its own fresh statement and way more like a direct response, almost a sequel to the world Kendrick Lamar already built with GNX. It is the kind of listen where you basically need the foundation of the earlier album just to fully understand what the follow-up is even reacting to, kind of like how you need to watch an entire cinematic universe build up before the final crossover movie really lands the way it is supposed to. That in itself tells you exactly who is setting the pace in this whole conversation and who is simply responding to it 2 years later. But the real fireworks in this whole saga didn't come from confused fans arguing over metrics. They came from one very specific, very familiar name who has basically built an entire online personality out of being reflexively against Kendrick Lamar at every single opportunity that presents itself. Isaac Hayes III. Y'all, this man Isaac Hayes III has spent what feels like years positioning himself as some kind of anti-Kendrick Lamar, anti-Drake propaganda machine, constantly hunting for any excuse under the sun to downplay Kendrick Lamar's wins the second they happen. This time, his big argument was that a completely different rapper, one who wasn't even sitting in serious contention for this specific category the way people assumed, somehow deserved that trophy over Kendrick Lamar instead. Isaac Hayes III tried to spin the whole result as some kind of manufactured, industry-driven decision, tossing around phrases about award strikes and hidden agendas like he had just uncovered some grand backroom conspiracy. Except there was no conspiracy. There was just Kendrick doing what he has done for years, quietly outperforming the noise while everyone else scrambles to find a narrative that makes the outcome feel less inevitable. Let's name exactly what happened here, because vague references really don't do this justice. Isaac Hayes III, a whole-grown man whose entire online personality at this point revolves around finding a fresh reason to be upset every single time Kendrick wins anything, decided that the rapper who should have taken home Best Male Hip-Hop Artist instead was Don Toliver. Not J. Cole. Not Drake. Don Toliver. And to be extremely clear right here, this is not a shot at Don Toliver, who got dragged into this manufactured beef through absolutely no fault of his own. Don Toliver is talented. He makes great music. He has his own lane, and nobody serious is trying to disrespect Don Toliver as a rapper. But trying to set Don Toliver up as some kind of snub victim against Kendrick Lamar when Don Toliver simply has not reached anywhere close to the heights Kendrick has hit over the last 2 years, especially coming off arguably one of the most dominant stretches any rapper has strung together in recent memory, is not a fair fight. And everybody watching it play out in real time could see exactly what was happening. It looked less like genuine advocacy for Don Toliver and way more like somebody trying to manufacture a moment using another rapper's name as a prop against Kendrick Lamar. And that distinction matters more than people are willing to admit. What makes this whole criticism even more baffling is the logic sitting underneath it. Kendrick didn't win Album of the Year at this show. He won Best Male Hip-Hop Artist. Those are 2 completely different lanes measuring 2 completely different things, and mashing them together is either a deliberate misunderstanding or a straight-up failure to read the actual category description before firing off outrage online. The award recognizes cultural impact, staying power, and influence across the entire eligibility window, not exclusively whoever managed to release the newest project. If longevity and staying power are genuinely part of the equation, then an older album that refuses to lose relevance can absolutely outweigh a brand new release that barely makes it a full news cycle before disappearing into the algorithm. That is not favoritism. That is the category working exactly the way it was designed to. And here is something else worth calling out, because honestly, it is one of the most entertaining pieces of this whole saga. Watch how quickly the goalposts move every time Kendrick wins something. During awards season earlier, the narrative was that he was some kind of industry favorite riding a wave of favorable voting. Now that he is dominating a fan-voted category built on real engagement and real staying power, suddenly the story flips into calling him an award darling instead, as if that is somehow an insult rather than more proof that people simply cannot find consistent ground to stand on. You cannot lose an argument gracefully and then immediately invent a brand new argument from scratch the very next morning and expect anyone paying attention to take it seriously. The bigger picture in all of this, and something worth sitting with for a real second, is how disconnected online outrage actually is from real-world cultural weight. Loud opinions on social media do not automatically translate into real influence, real sales, or real staying power. What actually translates into the real world is artistry, consistency, and measurable impact, the exact three things Kendrick has stacked up relentlessly over the last several years while a slice of the internet spent its energy trying to manufacture reasons to be mad about it. A lot of the people posting the angriest takes about this trophy almost certainly did not even bother to actually vote when the ballot was open, yet somehow they found plenty of energy to complain about the outcome after the fact. And that pattern isn't unique to hip-hop either. That is the exact same behavior you see in every kind of public vote, where people show up loud for the results and stay completely silent during the part that actually mattered. And let's sit on Isaac Hayes 3 for one more second, because this really was not an isolated incident. This has to be somewhere close to the 100th time Isaac Hayes 3 has found a way to shove a jab at Kendrick into a completely unrelated conversation. Every single time Kendrick accomplishes something worth celebrating, Isaac Hayes 3 pops up trying to reroute the credit somewhere else. Whether that means propping up Drake, propping up whoever happens to be nominated against him that particular year, or manufacturing some kind of industry conspiracy to explain away a win that had absolutely nothing conspiratorial about it in the first place. At a certain point, this whole pattern stops looking like genuine music criticism and starts looking like a whole personality built entirely around being reflexively anti-Kendrick Lamar, which honestly says a whole lot more about Isaac Hayes 3 than it ever will about Kendrick Lamar himself. Even voices inside the wider hip-hop commentary space have started calling this pattern out publicly. Names like Jacob B. and Well, both of whom have TDE ties and have weighed in on this exact controversy already, made the point plain as day. Internet arguments do not carry real weight in the real world. Jacob B. specifically pointed out that BET itself had already flagged Kendrick as the rapper to beat heading into this category, that certain rival fanbases had a whole meltdown over that framing in the comments section, and that he still walked away with the trophy regardless of how loud the pushback got. Jacob B. drew a direct line back to the Grammy cycle too, reminding everyone that smear campaigns were already tried once before, hoping Kendrick would have a quiet night. And instead, he had the loudest night of his whole career and became the most awarded rapper in Grammy history. This pattern repeats because the formula behind it never actually changes. Consistent output, minimal noise, and results that speak way louder than any tweet ever could. There is also a serious conversation buried inside this controversy about what numbers really mean versus what they claim to represent. Streaming numbers, sales figures, and chart positions can absolutely be inflated through passive listening, meaning music playing in stores, in restaurants, at parties, in the background of somebody's whole day without them ever actively choosing to press play. That kind of exposure pads a number without reflecting genuine fan engagement. Compare that to a rapper whose name trends organically without dropping a single new song, whose old album is still generating fresh conversation 2 full years after release, and whose concerts consistently sell out as one of the biggest touring draws in the entire genre. One of those patterns reflects passive exposure. The other reflects a real, engaged, dedicated fanbase that shows up every single time. And right now, by nearly every measurable standard beyond raw, inflated streaming counts, Kendrick Lamar's fanbase is doing the heavy lifting in that second category, while certain other camps are quietly leaning on the first. Even beyond the numbers debate, look at what is actually dominating timelines in real time. A completely unrelated controversy involving another veteran rapper calling Kendrick Lamar's skills into question instantly became the single biggest topic in hip-hop within hours, generating more conversation, more clips, more reaction videos, and more real cultural buzz than most full album rollouts managed to squeeze out of an entire promotional cycle. That is the kind of gravitational pull that simply cannot be manufactured through marketing budgets or industry favors. That happens because the culture is still actively locked in on every single move connected to Kendrick Lamar's name, whether Kendrick Lamar is the one making noise or simply the subject other rappers can't stop talking about. Voices inside Kendrick Lamar's own camp have chimed in on this whole saga too, and their message has been refreshingly blunt. The internet's opinions and the real world's outcomes are simply not the same currency. Article after article, headline after headline, going back through award season after award season has already documented the exact same pattern. Rival fanbases work themselves into a whole frenzy trying to manufacture doubt, trying to talk Kendrick down before results even come in, and every single time, he walks away with the trophy anyway. Loudest night of the whole ceremony included. At some point, you have to accept that opinions without receipts do not actually carry any real weight. What carries weight is showing up, putting in the work quietly, and letting the actual output speak for itself, which is exactly the blueprint Kendrick has been running for years now while everyone else scrambles to find a fresh angle to attack from. It is also worth mentioning that this whole firestorm didn't stay confined to just one commentator either. Once the win got announced, it didn't take long before rival fanbases connected to both Drake and J. Cole started flooding comment sections and timelines with their own flavor of outrage, basically arguing that neither of their favorites walking home empty-handed somehow invalidated Kendrick Lamar's win, rather than simply reflecting the voting criteria as written. But here is the thing that gets lost every single time this argument bubbles up. This is not actually a Drake versus Kendrick Lamar scoreboard, and it never has been. You cannot tally up a win or a loss for either rapper through tweets, through comment section arguments, or through manufactured outrage cycles that dissolve within 48 hours. The only scoreboard that has ever mattered in this whole rivalry is the one built from actual cultural impact, actual sales, actual streaming behavior from real engaged listeners, and actual touring numbers. And on every single one of those fronts, Kendrick Lamar keeps separating himself from the pack in ways that are almost impossible to argue against with a straight face. So where does that leave the discourse right now? It leaves it exactly where it always ends up whenever this specific debate resurfaces. A 5-year unbeaten streak, 8 total trophies in one single category, a commercial monster of an album that refuses to stop performing more than a full year after release, a fanbase that shows up to vote, shows up to stream, and shows up to fill arenas without needing a fresh single to justify the loyalty. And on the other side, a rotating cast of critics who keep changing their argument every single time the last one collapses under basic scrutiny. Plus Isaac Hayes III, who managed to embarrass himself trying to manufacture a snub narrative that never actually existed in the first place. And none of this means the rappers caught in the crossfire of this manufactured drama deserve any disrespect either. This whole situation really isn't about tearing anybody else down. It is about recognizing when a genuinely historic milestone is happening in real time, and refusing to let manufactured outrage rewrite what actually took place. 5 years in a row has literally never happened before in this category. 8 wins total has literally never happened before in this category. And whether the loudest corners of the internet want to accept it or not, the numbers, the streak, and the staying power all agree on the exact same conclusion. Now here is the part where I actually need y'all to get involved, because this comment section is about to be a straight-up war zone regardless of what side you land on. Do you think this 5-year streak is officially the most disrespected historic achievement in hip-hop award history? Do you think the criteria behind this trophy actually makes sense, or should rappers be required to drop something brand new every single year to even qualify? And most importantly, do you think Isaac Hayes III finally learned his lesson after this latest attempt backfired in front of everyone watching, or is Isaac Hayes III already cooking up his next manufactured controversy as we speak? Drop your honest take in the comments right now, because I promise you this section is going to be pure chaos within the hour. If this breakdown actually opened your eyes to just how deep this rivalry really goes and how manufactured most of the online outrage really is, do me a favor and smash that like button before you go anywhere. It genuinely helps push videos like this one out to more people who need to see exactly how these narratives get built up and torn back down in real time. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe because we are covering every single angle of this unfolding story as new information keeps dropping. Trust me, this is nowhere close to being over. Turn on the notifications too, because the next update in this saga is going to hit even harder than this one did, and you do not want to be the last person finding out. At the end of the day, strip away every angry tweet, every manufactured hot take, and every Isaac Hayes 3 attempt to force a narrative that doesn't hold up under real pressure, and you are left with one simple, undeniable truth. Kendrick Lamar didn't need a brand new album to prove he still runs this category, this conversation, and this entire era of hip-hop. The streak speaks for itself. The sales speak for themselves. And the culture, whether it wants to admit it out loud or not, has already made its decision. 5 years running, 8 trophies deep, and judging by everything we just broke down together, this conversation is nowhere close to finished, because the moment the next ceremony rolls back around, y'all already know exactly whose name is going to be called first. That's the tea on my end, and I'll catch up with y'all real soon.